Welcome, everyone. We're going to begin in just a few moments. All right, everyone, just so we stay on time, I'm going to go ahead and begin. I hope you didn't have any issues getting on today. So welcome alumni, students, faculty, staff, and the broader Pepperdine community to the Pepperdine-Caruso Law Black Alumni of the Board of Advisors and the Dean's Council, moderated by Dean Paul Karen and Assistant Dean Shellac Richards. My name is Jessie Fay, and I'm the Alumni Director for the Law School. Before our dean begins today's event, I want to go over a few details. Each alumnus will be given a few minutes to share, and afterwards we will open the event up for questions and answers after everyone has shared. If you have questions for the panelists, for one person or all of the panelists, please put them in the Q&A box or the chat box, and then specify if it's for everyone or a specific panelist. Please note that we want to give our panelists the maximum amount of time to speak and answer your questions. So we will not be reading their impressive bios. Instead, there is a link in the chat box with the bios for the Board of Advisors and the Dean's Council separated out, and those were also emailed to you. So please take time to study those even before you ask your questions too. We are honored to have you here today for this important but difficult conversation. We hope it will help all of us grow stronger, more enlightened, and more empowered to seek justice as a law school community. Now I will turn this event over to Dean Paul Karen.
Thank you all for being here today. This is a difficult time in our nation's history. Pepperdine-Caruso Law stands with our Black alumni, students, staff, and faculty against all forms of racial injustice. When I became dean 3 years ago, I inherited an advisory board of alumni leaders that consisted of 2% Black members and 8% persons of color. I immediately began working with my then associate dean, now president, Jim Gash, to increase the diversity of the board. In 2018, we disbanded what was then called our Board of Visitors and created a new board, the Board of Advisors. Our new Board of Advisors has 18% Black members and 22% persons of color. At the first meeting of the new board in October of 2018, we spent much of our time discussing how to increase diversity at our law school. The number one recommendation of the board was to create an assistant dean of diversity at the law school, which we did in November 2019 when Shellac Richards agreed to serve in that new role. In May 2019, we created a second board of our younger alumni leaders that we call our Dean's Council. The Dean's Council has 8% Black members and 22% persons of color. We are proud of the progress we have made in increasing the diversity on our boards, but we have much more work to do. We are thrilled to have 12 Black members of our Board of Advisors and Dean's Council here with us today for this important conversation. They all excel in the practice of law with distinguished careers across the full spectrum of legal practice: the judiciary, private practice, public service, and nonprofits. They live and work around the country and around the world. Frankly, it's not a secret that the legal profession as a whole and Pepperdine as a school have been predominantly white. Many of the alumni you will hear from today came to Pepperdine at a very different time than we live in today. They're going to share their experience at Pepperdine and in the legal profession so we can better understand where we have been as a law school and as a profession, and more importantly, where we need to go. Pepperdine is committed to increasing the diversity of our law school and thus helping to increase the diversity of the legal profession by recruiting and retaining more students of color. We are thrilled that Rick Caruso shares this goal. The single largest component of his $50 million naming gift last October is to expand scholarship funding for students from underrepresented groups to attend our law school. Our alumni of color are vital partners in helping to increase diversity at the law school. As one of many examples, Judge Dwayne Mooring, who you will hear from soon, was instrumental in bringing both the California Law's Pathway to Law program and the for People of Color program to Pepperdine. If you want to hear more about these and other diversity efforts, we have a link to the diversity website in the chat box, as well as the email address for Shellac Richards, who will be facilitating the Q&A at the end of this event. Now, let's hear from our 12 members of our Board of Advisors and Dean's Council who are here today. First up is the Honorable Andre Perot, U.S. District Court Judge for the Central District of California and member of the Pepperdine Law class of 1991. Judge Perot.
Dean Karen, thank you so much, and it's wonderful to virtually see you all today. And thank you, Pepperdine, for taking on this important and challenging discussion. It speaks volumes of the university and its commitment to all the students that it represents. It's nice to see many of my, my classmate, Dwayne Mooring, and a mentor of mine for many, many years who I met on one of my first days at Pepperdine, Pierre Prosper, on this call as well. As Dean Karen mentioned, Pepperdine was a very different place. I think back when I stepped on the campus in 1988, our class had 11 African-American students, and Dwayne Mooring was kind enough to remind me that it was 11 instead of 10. And I think for the total of the school, there couldn't have been more than 13 or 14 total. I know Pierre was in the third year class. I remember Patrick Smith, I think, was in the second year class. I may be wrong on that, but the bottom line is that there weren't that many African-American students in the law school, but the school embraced us, welcomed us. Were there some interesting moments? Certainly. The ones that jumped to my mind are, one of the times I think I was at the Malibu Inn or one of those adult drinking establishments, clearly just drinking soda water. And someone literally came up to me, grabbed my hand, rubbed my hand, looked at me and said, "Welcome to Malibu." I can only assume that they had not seen someone of my pigmentation before, and they were marveled at it. On the same token, I remember one of our classmates, and Dwayne, I don't know if you remember this story, first year student, she and another student were going to rent an apartment in Malibu on the beach. The other student had filled out the application, and then when Beverly came in to sign the final paperwork, there were some issues or problems. The other student was, I don't believe was African-American, Beverly was, and basically were coming up with reasons why they couldn't rent the apartment any longer. But that's where Pepperdine came in. I cannot remember the name of the professor. He was a property professor, and he wrote what I can imagine was a strongly worded letter to the landlord indicating what problems that would create by not renting to someone because of the appearance that it may be their skin. And Beverly Bourne got to live on the beach her first year in law school, and we all got to take advantage of that as well. So Pepperdine, in many ways has always been supportive. When we sort of formed, if you will, BALSA, because we finally had enough students to do so, Pepperdine was there to help us acknowledge and commemorate Martin Luther King Day, which I believe at that time was not celebrated on the campus. And so Pepperdine has been there consistently, not only in school, but following school, and has been an incredibly supportive environment. And I know for the alumni, to the extent I can offer any challenge to the group that's watching or listening, we've got to make sure we can do whatever we can to reach out to those Pepperdine students currently that will be looking for employment and or mentorship. The same way that when my first year of law school, an alumni who's on this call, Zena Portlock, she invited all the students to come to her place and introduce us to other lawyers, not necessarily Pepperdine alum, because quite frankly, there weren't that many Pepperdine alum of color, but she convened a group of lawyers that gave us as first years the opportunity to see what we could dream to be. And a number of those lawyers I'm still friends with to this day. I tried to do something last year by having some of the first years over at my house and inviting some alumni. And so to that end, once we get through this COVID crisis, I'd want to do something like that again. And so hopefully you'll be receptive to that, because we need to reach back to these students to help them as they go through their journey. And we can tell them the stories of our experiences in order to guide them and nurture them and continue what Pepperdine is all about, being a supportive network for all of our alums. So that's all my comments for now. And unfortunately, I have to leave at about 1 o'clock, but I'm going to stay on until then.
Thank you, Judge. Next up, we have Zena Portlock Houston, Seaver College class of 1984, and her JD at our law school from 1987. Zena is an attorney and an entrepreneur and adjunct professor at our law school. Zena?
Thank you, Dean Karen. I have my timer on myself today for our panelists who suffered through me yesterday. So what I really want to share is more about the experiences, particularly of Black women in the workplace post-graduation. And I came across this article that was part of a CNBC show, and I'll just share briefly some statistics. This was written in July of this year. Currently, there are a record 37 women leading Fortune 500 firms, an increase from last year's record high of 33. Of these women, just 3 are women of color and none are Black or Latina. When looking at the total workforce in the US, Black women account for 7% of the population, but make up 12% of minimum wage earners. This article is entitled "How Corporate America's Diversity Initiatives Continue to Fail Black Women." And as a Black woman and as a Black attorney, having worked in nonprofit, for-profit, public sector, private sector, I can say that across the board, issues of gender bias, gender discrimination, discrimination based on the color of my skin has been prevalent across all of those industries. And so one of the things that I would like for us to be able to walk away from sessions like this is, as Judge Andre Barat just mentioned, to support one another, to be available to one another so that we can share stories, so we can walk through situations that unfortunately are bound to plague us. And it's never a pleasant situation or scenario to be confronted with. But unfortunately, it does happen, and to have the ability to stand in your truth and to know that others are standing with you is just something that's incredibly important. And so I lastly want to just thank Pepperdine for being on the forefront of these issues and not waiting for it to percolate from the student body to say, what are you doing? What are you going to do? What is the university's position? Can we have a forum to have these kinds of discussions? So I continue to be a proud alum. Thank you.
Thank you, Zena. Next up, we have Jaron Wright, who earned his JD in 2009 from Pepperdine, and then his MBA from the Gracia in 2011. He is now a business affairs executive at Amazon Studios. Jaron?
Hi, thanks so much for having me. Thank you so much to Dean Karen, Dean Richards, Jesse for putting this together. is certainly reflective of the progress that we have made, even if just a little bit, and where we're trying to go, so to speak. So, just a little bit about me, not the full bio, but, I grew up in Texas, a young Black male, where one of the rules in our house was there couldn't be more than 3 of my friends, Black males, in the car at any one time, because we know, you drive down a certain street, even if you're coming home from church or whatever it is, you're getting pulled over. And that certainly happened a couple times, and had some run-ins in Austin with police slamming me on cars, things like that. When I played football in college, so certain words were thrown out, slurs and things like that, depending on what part of the country you were playing a game in. So, that sort of thing is real. But certainly when I got to Pepperdine, I had a very different experience where I felt welcomed. Obviously there's certain things that people say that are, they might not mean that, intentionally or mean to hurt you, but it's just insensitive. But on the whole, I had a very magical experience. I had a roommate who ended up being, one of my best friends, and in my wedding, who I could actually talk to about race issues. And we have, as of even as late as, last month, and other good friends from my Pepperdine experience who I've also been able to really share and dive deep into these issues with. So it's been great, so this alumni network, even your friends within your classes and in your time there, can be a great support during this difficult time. And I think during my time, I was the second Black SBA president ever in the history of Pepperdine, which I don't say that about me, but just in terms of, the low percentages of our, attendees historically, and how we can sort of all work together to even make those percentages go up as well. And I say that because one thing I guess I didn't realize until I got into the corporate world is that frequently I'm either the only Black person on my team, or I'm the first Black person to do nothing out of the ordinary, but just be the first lawyer at Amazon Studios who's a Black male or Black at all, or the first Black business affairs executive on my team. And I'm just thinking to myself, these are doors as alumni, especially my fellow Black alumni. When you go somewhere, we're literally opening doors and being the first person there for students who are graduating, or young lawyers who will be where we are one day. So it's a privilege to carry the torch, and I'm happy to have been attended Pepperdine Law to be a part of this family to do that. And so I think, just to sort of round third here, advocacy is so important. I have 2 mentors above me, one in the TV industry who's VP at Fox, who's a big brother to me, Shala Ajawole, and then another big brother on the TV side, as well, music side, as well, Kevin Shivers at WME, who look out for me. And so I don't talk a lot about this, but I have a couple of people too that I kind of shepherd along as well, because, being a black person at all in these sort of big corporate environments is, it helps to have someone who knows what you're going through. And so to my fellow alumni who aren't Black or thinking about what you can do, I'll just call back to my roommate from law school who's on this call, Aaron Eccles. We had a very extensive conversation about just being yourself, and be a person who can help change the mind of people around you by still being yourself, but talking about things different and raising that level of consciousness about what's going on in the world, and how we can see each other different and slow down enough to see each other and love each other for our differences. And so it's an extraordinary time. And again, it's been an honor to be a part of the Pepperdine family, who took me in with so much love and acceptance. So wish you all the best, and thank you again for having me.
Thank you, Darren. Next up is the Honorable Dwayne Boring, Seaver College class of 1984, Pepperdine Law class of 1991, Superior Court Judge on the San Diego Superior Court. Judge Morin.
There, unmuted. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank you again, Dean Karen and Dean Richards, and Jesse, our alumni director, and everyone else in the administration for inviting me to be part of this panel. From my bio, you all can tell that Pepperdine has been very special to me throughout my life. I first set foot on the campus about 40 years ago as an undergrad. And during that time, I worked on the college newspaper and student publications. And with Zena Portlock, we were both involved in student publications. She went on to law school directly. I took a little bit more of a circuitous route. But throughout my career and life, Pepperdine has always been very special to me. And I've had just, by and large, the best experiences. As Judge Barat pointed out, the law school class that we had, the class of 1991, really was kind of a groundbreaking class. Prior to us, there were very few African Americans enrolled at the law school. And then in 1988, 11 of us rolled up on campus, and we all made it through the first year. We all graduated. We all passed the bar, either in California or in our home states. So I just think that was just a fantastic example of the law school investing in talent, nurturing that talent, and seeing that there were great results. For my class of 91, we've got our federal court judge, Judge Barat. I'm on the Superior Court in San Diego, and Beverly Bourne is on the Superior Court in Los Angeles. So those are pretty good stats. And we have other attorneys, John Jonum, I hope he's on the line, who are excellent and are seasoned professionals. So when the university invests in individuals and puts the effort into it, I think it's pretty obvious that there will be great results. I don't want to repeat what some of the other individuals have said, but I will point out that we have a duty. We have a responsibility to mentor our fellow alumni and those students who are at the law school right now. I've done everything I can to provide guidance to law students and to young individuals who are just starting their career. I've got a career preparation checklist that I've given to Dean Richards to share with the students. I try and make sure that whenever anyone wants to meet with me, I do. We've got a responsibility. And just as Jaron was saying, it's really shocking to me that almost 30 years after I graduated from law school, I'm still in situations where I'm the first African American to hold a position. 30 years ago, I didn't think that would be the case. I thought all the firsts had been accomplished, but I'm here at my courthouse and I'm the first African American supervising judge at one of our court branches in 20 years, which is just a shame. And we now have Judge Randa Trapp, who is the supervising judge for our civil division, and she's the first African American to hold that position. We only have one African American working in our civil division in San Diego County. That's out of 135 Superior Court judges and 15 commissioners. So there's still a lot of work to be done, a lot of barriers to break, glass ceilings to smash. And I hope that we all continue along those efforts, that we support each other, and that we reach back to make sure that we're continuing that pipeline for up and coming talent. Thank you all for having me here today.
Thank you, Judge Maureen. Next, we'll hear from Ambassador Pierre Richard Prosper, Pepperdine Law class of 1989 and partner at Aaron Fox. Ambassador Prosper.
Thank you, Dean. I hope you can hear me. Well, first let me say it's a pleasure, privilege, and an honor to not only be invited to be part of this call, but to be with this group. I like to see the faces and the names that are here. I say Andre just turned his video back on, and many of us go way back. You know, what's great about this call is the fact that we are able to hold it. When I came to Pepperdine, I'm the class of '89, so I arrived in '86. I was the only Black person on campus in the law school. Following year, as Andre said, Patrick Smith arrived. But it was during, I believe, either my first year or the beginning of my second year, I approached the then Dean Ron Phillips, and we had a conversation. I said, this is a problem. This is an issue. We really need to diversify the school, not just simply for the sake of diversity, but it is because the diversity will also enrich the student population. It will enrich all those that are there studying law and give them a better appreciation of not only the real world, but the real issues. And it was then that, working with Dean Phillips, that he made a concerted effort to really shake it up and change the numbers, which led to the class that Andre discussed of 11 people, Andre and Dwayne and others coming in. And it was fascinating for me, going from literally being the only person there, then Patrick coming along, then all of a sudden we have this wave come in my third year. With that, as we're discussing now, came responsibilities. I became the leader of the Black Law Student Association. And really what that was is I'm not sure how much leading I actually did, other than was more of a sounding board for all those that had just arrived, that were shocked by the percentages even then with the new additions. And then you add on top of that the difficulty of first year of law school, as we all know, is just a trying period, and particularly the first semester. So I'm glad that we all made it, and we all succeeded, moved on, graduated, and have been able to contribute to society. Not only is it a testament to each individual that attended and rose in the situation, is it also a testament to our other classmates, non-minority white classmates, who also had to embrace a situation that they may not have been comfortable with or used to. But more importantly, I think it's a tribute to Pepperdine. And equally, what is a tribute to Pepperdine is the fact that the school continues to reflect on these issues, Dean, under your leadership, continues to try to advance these issues, the issues of humanity, the issues of social justice. You know, I think as our new president of the university, when he was at the law school, really embraced these issues and really embraced it on the African continent, which I think is again telling to what Pepperdine is all about. My message to those that are listening really is, echo what has already been said to date or during this call, but really is to continue to charge ahead. You may be the only one, you may be the first one, but the responsibility is to carry that torch, to carry that mantle. It's not going to be easy. There will be challenges, but life is filled with challenges. But in my experience, I find that embracing these challenges not only has helped me, but it helped those that I engage with. And then I also realized that by forging ahead, the way that you change the system is by willingly being part of the system. And I'll end with this related story. When I left Pepperdine, I had a choice. I had a choice to be either public defender or deputy district attorney or be in a law firm. And I remember, some of my the schoolmates, underclass people saying, well, why do you want to go to the DA's office? We have all these people that, brothers and sisters or whomever that need your help on the public defender side, which is true. But I remember making the decision that, one, I wanted to be a prosecutor because I felt I could help achieve justice. But if you're going to want to change the system, you need to be part of the system. And this is my view. I didn't want to walk into the situation and perpetuate the us versus them. I wanted to be on the other side and really push and contribute and be a factor. And fortunately, it worked out. It worked out in District Attorney's Office. It worked out U.S. Attorney's Office, the UN, and throughout the federal government. But I'll end here. Dean, thank you for putting this together. And it's great to see these familiar faces on the screen.
Thank you, Ambassador Prosper. Next, we'll hear from Nazareth Haysbert, Pepperdine Law Class of 2012 and partner at Haysbert and Oltree. Nazareth.
Thank you, Dean Caron. Thank you, Dean Richards, as well. And Jesse, I see you here at the top. Thank you guys for inviting me to be a part of this. Most of you don't know I was grafted into the Pepperdine family. I started my law school career at the University of Oklahoma. While I was there, I was heading to the law school for a summer class and was pulled over by officers. I was going about 10 miles an hour heading from a physical. I was heading out of the country to work at a law firm in South Africa. And as I came to a stop in the parking lot next to the law school, 2 police cars came rolling by me. I saw an officer get out of his car, run by the back of my vehicle with guns drawn. And, so I stopped my vehicle. I heard a booming voice over a loudspeaker, get out of the vehicle. And as I stepped out of the vehicle, I saw 2 officers who were obviously very angry and were shaking even with almost like rage, with guns pointed at me directly at my face from a distance of about 10 feet. I could see into the white of the gun, it was that close. And all I can say is God came over me and took over my body. And so I wasn't really even paying attention to what they were saying, but my body was moving in accordance with their directions until they put their handcuffs on me and put me in their police vehicle. And so I have to give honor and glory where it's due. It was totally my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ who saved my life that day. And it wasn't soon after that I came out to Pepperdine and embarked on a career as a civil rights attorney. I believe that was the beginning of that shift. What I see now, and I came around the time just before Trayvon Martin was killed. And those of you who remember that time, I was a very young man when Rodney King was beaten. This was my Rodney King, and Trayvon Martin started this incredible shift and what we see today in terms of a civil rights movement, what we've seen it become. And so if anything, I can say to everyone on this phone call, this is an opportunity for us to seize the moment. This is an incredible group of people. The Pepperdine family in general, I thank God for allowing me to be a part of this. Thank you very much for welcoming me to be a part of your family. This is an incredible opportunity for us to work on amazing issues that need our attention. Issues like qualified immunity, absolute immunity for prosecutors. For those of you who don't know me, with me saying what I just said, you know that I'm probably a plaintiff's attorney and that I represent the victims of police brutality. And not just that, but human rights around the world. I have clients around the world who are victims of human rights abuses. Most recently, we received a judgment on behalf of victims of the US Embassy attack in Kenya that killed a number of folks and injured others. And my firm is shifting in a sense to attempting to correct historical injustice, trying to be a part of the movement that we see happening, and this is really happening around the world. So I just want to see people that I can join with in this community so that we can do the justice that I believe our Lord told us to do in Micah and Psalms and other places. So if you could, Dean Caron, thank you very, very much for the privilege and the honor of being among this group. Dean Richards, thank you again, Jesse. And I appreciate being a part of you guys. I love what's happening right now, and I just want to continue to listen to all the wisdom in this body. He that walks among wise men is wise, as the scriptures say. And I'm glad to be counted among that number.
Thank you, Nazareth. Up next is Jack White, Pepperdine Law class of 2003, and partner at Fluid, Huber, and Hahn. Jack?
Well, thank you, Dean Karen and Dean Richards for your leadership here and for letting me be a part of this. You know, I am a Black man and an attorney, but I am no expert on these issues of race. So I am as much listening today as I am talking. But I do have a thought that I'd like to share by way of vignette. Several years ago, I was involved in a 1983 action against a university that's a member of the SEC. They had a lot of Black students who exhibited sickle cell trait, and they were putting them on the athletic fields, and a number of these young Black students were dying. And I had done all the drafting, and we got to the point of dispositive motions. And I had a local counsel who had not, he was older and he was not of the age of internet stalking. So he saw my background, and it never occurred to him that a US Army veteran and a former Supreme Court clerk named Jack White might be Black. Because my parents didn't name me Devontae Johnson. They named me Jack White. So right before the hearing, the summary judgment hearing, one of his people informed him that I am indeed Black. And he gave me a call, and it was the most uncomfortable call, uncomfortable for him, because he said to me, Mr. White, you know what, I'm not gonna do the Southern accent. He said, it might not be in the best interest of your client for you to come out here and argue this motion. Now, I'll tell you, that broke my heart. It hurt. But at that moment, at that stage in my career, I called upon one of my colleagues and allowed him to go down and argue the motion. Fast forward to about a month ago, again, a 1983 action. This time in Tennessee, Cicely, Johnson City. And again, I have local counsel. And again, we got to dispositive motions. And again, I got the call from my local counsel saying, Mr. White, it might not be in your client's best interest to come down. You know, I reacted a little differently. The environment is different. I'm different. And my attitude this time was, well, I'm sorry, but those courts down there in Tennessee, they're gonna have to deal with my Black face. And I appeared. Now, the reason I share that is because in both instances, I did what I thought was in the best interest of my clients. I should share that in both instances, the situation worked out well for the client. But both instances were tough situations. But I was true to myself. And I've heard people on this call say, be true to yourself, stay the course. You know, in our profession, we have to do what we think is in the best interest of our clients. Some of us also believe that we have to answer to God for everything that we do. And in the instance where I chose to not go down I can answer to God for what I did. And a month or so ago, when I did appear, I can answer to God for what I did. And so, you know, these race situations, I think the world is getting better, but it's still hurtful. And that's real. I don't think we should gloss over that. It's still unjust. There are too many people who do not see race issues for what they are. But what do? Well, I think we stay the course. And I think one of my friends, Carmen, said the other day, we have to remember that we belong. If anybody has the right to argue in favor of justice in these United States, it's a Black person. And if anybody has an entitlement to claim that they are true Americans, it's us. So we should all stay the course and take advantage of situations like this where we have each other as resources. At any rate, thank you so much for letting me share, and thank you, Dean Karen, Dean Richards, for putting this together.
Thank you, Jack. Next up is Deanna Newton, Pepperdine Law class of 2017 and an International Tax Associate at KPMG. Deanna.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I started law school in 2014, so it was a very similar political climate. Eric Garner was killed, Tamir Rice was killed, and the list goes on, unfortunately. I was also in school during the 2016 presidential election. I will say that Pepperdine has always been supportive of me, and I am eternally grateful for that. If it had not been for Dean Karen and Professor Johnson and Professor Odie and Professor Cortez and Dean Schultz, I would not be where I am today. I will say that in practice, I love practicing. However, don't be alarmed. There are things that you will have to deal with, but you can stand up in integrity and character and deal with them. I'll give you an example. 3 months into my career as the first Black international tax attorney in my office, I was asked to join the hiring committee, and I did so. And so there were two candidates, one white male who had taken one tax class and a white female who had taken 3 tax classes and was getting her LLM in tax law. So as the team debriefed, they wanted to pick the white male who had only taken 1 tax class. No one else spoke up except me, and I told them that they had to be crazy to think that they could pick a white male with 1 tax class over a white female with 3 tax classes and a master's degree in tax law. I say that to say, if that is what is happening to white candidates, you can only imagine what is happening to Black candidates and how many people cannot even get their resumes through the door. I say that to say I'm here to support anyone in any way that I can, mentoring, whatever you guys need, I'm here, because now I'm in a place where I'm in rooms where I can bring people with me and I can stand in integrity and stand in my character and speak for justice, even if I have to stand alone. Thank you.
Thank you, Deanna. Next up is Angela Powell, Seaver College class of 1993, Pepperdine Law class of 1997, a partner in Anning, Cass, Elrod, Ramirez, and Trester. Angela?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. And in particular, thank you, Dean Karen, Dean Richards, and Jesse Fahey for organizing this event, which, as we all know, has come on the heels of the civil unrest after the incident in Minnesota with George Floyd. I have had the privilege of being a prosecutor in the LA County DA's office. After that, I represented plaintiffs in civil rights cases brought against law enforcement. And now I can say I truly have the privilege to represent law enforcement agencies across the state. So to the young lawyers, graduates of Pepperdine, I want to say it's important to find your voice. We were asked to speak to you today about an incident of racism that we have suffered either as a law student or as an attorney. And I would say, thankfully, I haven't had to experience anything as a lawyer that I would say was a direct result of my race. I have been questioned, though, however, often how I could graduate law school and spend 7 years as a prosecutor, and now in representing law enforcement, especially in this tumultuous time in our nation's history, how I can defend law enforcement agencies and officers. And that's why, again, I say it's important to find your voice, because when people question you, they may not know your background. When I was 16 years old, my family moved to the high desert, and we lived in a small community on Spring Valley Lake. We were one of a few Black families to live in that neighborhood. Most of the time, my mom and dad would pick me up from school and bring me back home, but occasionally there were instances where I would take the local school bus. And there weren't any other Black kids on the bus, it was just me. And there were occasions when there were jokes told about Black people and the N-word used repeatedly. And I would get off the bus, and the same group of boys who were telling those jokes and using that word would be behind me, talking loud and saying the jokes over and over again. And as a young girl, you don't really know how to handle it. You don't want to draw attention. You know they're directing it at you. But my whole goal was to get home safe. So I didn't have a voice. I didn't say anything. And then when my mom and dad went to the school to talk to the principal and ask if he could do anything about what I was facing on the bus, he told my family that perhaps we should have a better sense of humor and learn to laugh at it. And I felt then that there was really not much I could do or say, and it hurt me a lot. And I remember there was a young white student who decided to sit next to me and would turn and tell those other boys to stop making jokes and to stop saying that word over and over again. And he would walk me home. So when I had a choice, like Ambassador Prosper said, of what I wanted to do and where I wanted to use my voice, I made the choice to be a prosecutor. And now, when I have a choice as to how I want to spend my career, I chose to represent law enforcement, and I do it with pride. When people ask me why I was a prosecutor or how I could be a person of color in the criminal justice system and not defend people, or even now why I choose to represent law enforcement instead of continuing to bring civil rights cases against them, I ask them, who better to have a voice in the DA's office? And who better to sit down in the same room with police officers and chiefs and sheriffs than me? Why not me? And so I thank you, Dean Karen, for allowing us to have this opportunity. So as young lawyers, I tell you, don't be afraid to choose your own path and to let your voice be heard in whatever area it is you choose. We are so privileged and honored to be living in a time where we have many choices and many opportunities. So again, I applaud the school for having us speak today, and thank you again.
Thank you, Angela. Next up is Carmen Cole, Pepperdine Law class of 2001 and partner at Squire, Patton, and Boggs. Carmen?
Thank you, Dean Karen, Dean Richards, and Ms. Fay for organizing this amazing panel. I think a panel that is necessary as part of the whole discussion that we're in this movement. If Pepperdine is who we say we are as a Christian law school, addressing this piece of history that's happening right now and how we got here, I think is part of that responsibility, if indeed we are who we say we are, and I believe we are. So with that, I'll share some of my perspective on a lot of things that have already been said, but I definitely echo Angela's comments a moment ago about the choice to represent law enforcement. For me, I don't represent law enforcement, but I do represent large institutional corporate clients. And I've been asked over the course of a nearly 20-year career, how can you defend what is commonly considered or colloquialized as the man in race discrimination lawsuits or wrongful termination lawsuits or retaliation lawsuits in the employment context? And my answer to that is that I think corporate America is a place where I don't think that Black voices are heard as often as they should be. So I think that my placement as an advisor and a counselor, and frankly, as we've all been told we are to be, which is foot soldiers of the Constitution, I feel like it is my duty as an outside attorney, as a defender of corporate clients, to advise and to educate and inform them on Black issues that are relevant in societies that my clients may not have access to. So I come in that role as sort of an ambassador, because as I believe, I think that distance creates suspicion. I think some of you have heard this before. When you're not familiar with something, you're suspicious of it. It's curious to you. But the more you're involved and you engage with something that you might not know, that familiarity will create empathy. And I think that's what's lacking in corporate America, and why I feel my role is so important. So with that, I'll give you just a little bit of a vignette that happened very early in my career when it became apparent to me how important it was that I continue to do the work that I was doing. I was interviewing a client at the time as a very young associate, and I can't obviously divulge the name of the client for obvious reasons, attorney-client privilege and all else, but I will say that the nature of the discussion was around how to handle an employee that needed discipline or perhaps termination based on performance issues. But the question really was in the phone interview, and this was at a time before photos were readily available on the internet at law firms, and my photo certainly wasn't available on the internet. The client on the other end of the phone, when I asked, what are the problems with this particular employee? The client said something like, the witness said, well, she doesn't perform well, and when we talk to her about it, she's kind of loud about it and kind of defensive. You know how they are. And I said, I'm not sure, who are you referring to they? Who's they? People in that department, people on that floor, people who sit in that side of the office. I said, well, she's Black, and you know how those Black girls are. You know how they are. She's just really loud and disruptive around the office. And I said, you know something? It's interesting that you say that, because I'm a Black girl, and so I would think that I do know exactly how they are, being one. And the silence on the other end of the phone was deafening. That was my moment. That was my entree. That was my opening to, I think, educate in an empathetic and sympathetic way with a person who really, I don't believe, had been exposed for her ignorance. And that is why I think that it's important for people like Angela, people like all of us, frankly, to educate in the roles that we're in. Because like I said, the more distant you are from a particular group of people, especially in this profession, the more suspicion there will be around them and their behavior. But as we work and engage more together, especially Black attorneys in corporate America, that type of familiarity will create some empathy for us, which I think is really needed at this time. So thank you, Dean Karen and Dean Richards and Ms. Fay, for making sure that we have this opportunity to engage and share our experiences. I think it's so important, and I think it's absolutely part of the education that's necessary for the law students at the law school. If we are, again, who we say we are, which is a Christian university. Racism is a sin. So to not address it in this forum, I think would be a mistake on our part. So thank you, Dean Karen, for prioritizing it. And thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Carmen. We'll hear next from Cicely Simpson, Pepperdine Law class of 2001, and founder, CEO of Summit Public Affairs. Cicely?
Great. Thank you, everyone. And I'll echo my colleagues in saying thank you, Dean Karen, Dean Richards. Thank you, Jesse, for hosting this conversation this afternoon. And I guess I really would just associate myself with Zena's comments and certainly Jaren's comments. I only practiced law for a year or so after I left Pepperdine before I came to DC. And I've spent the last 18, 19 years in public policy and politics, which you would not think would be a city nor a field where I would be one of the only ones in the room, to Jaren's point. But I came to DC to work for 2 Tennessee congressmen. And at that time in 2002, I'll just give you a couple of examples here. I was the only Black female to lead a white congressional office for a white member of Congress. I never thought that was a big deal. I had no idea that was a big deal. But the Congressional Black Law Students, Congressional Staff Association for Black Staff had come to me, and I had heard about this group, but no one asked me to be involved. And so when I finally sort of got wind of what was going on, I said, hey, why hasn't anyone invited me to be? And I've only been in DC a couple of months. And I was told, well, you work for a white member of Congress, so we don't really, want you in the group. So I thought, okay, I let that brush aside. And then it came up to me again a few months later, and the conversation was, well, we actually don't think you're Black enough to be in the group. So you haven't been invited because of who you work for. And quite frankly, we don't want you in the group, which was probably my first real professional example of facing race in any sort of professional context. At that point, what do you say? I let it go, obviously. Yes, I worked for 2 white members of Congress, had great experiences in both, wouldn't trade it for both. But that was my first realization that being in the room sometimes as a Black African-American female, it's tough being in those rooms. And so I left Capitol Hill and worked in corporate America for a number of years. What I thought would be different, right? It's corporate America. And no, I was the only African-American officer in a public company. And I was thankfully ascended to that at a young age, but it was again there that people said to me, we're glad you got promoted. We're glad you're in those rooms, like keep fighting for us. And I never fully appreciated, why is there no one else in the room who looks like me, male or female? Why am I the only one sitting here in these rooms? And that is so important in a way that I never really fully appreciated it until I started receiving those comments. And I thought, this is odd. Like, this is a huge company, a public company. Why is that the case? And so as I sort of ascended my career in DC, Zena and Jaren are right. It doesn't matter what role you're in. Even as I became an executive and led public affairs for one of the largest industries in the country and in the world, I was the only African-American, male or female, who led a major trade association in Washington, DC. And this was 2 years ago. This wasn't 20 years ago. And so being the only one in those rooms, I will tell you, has been a journey for me. I've started out sort of given the example on Capitol Hill, so I'll end with the example of, as I led public affairs, the question I got really a lot often was ageism. Aren't you a little young to be in your role? And I thought, okay, whatever. Maybe that just means I'm aging gracefully, right? So I'll take that as a compliment. But then I got, she only has her job because she's Black. You don't see any other Black person in DC leading a trade association, so why is she doing it? And very similar to Jack's point, that was a gut punch, because I'd worked my butt off. Yes, I put in the long hours. Yes, I had my head down for 18 years, and I'd gotten to the level that I wanted, only to have someone question my effort to get there because of the color of my skin. And so I share those examples to really back up Carmen and Jack and Zena and Jaren and everyone, and even Ambassador Prosper, you belong in the room. Don't ever let anyone tell you you don't, because of your hard work and your determination, and you deserve to be there, and we need you opening the doors that we had to open as well. But I will tell you what I've learned now that I have my own lobbying business and I have time to make time for it is, I did not bring others along with me on that journey. I did not reach out to Carmen and Jack, who I was in school with, and I wish I had it. I didn't have the support network of the folks on this call, and now I know I do, to get me through some of those tough times and help talk me through being the only one in the room, right, on so many occasions throughout my career. And so now I know, and I obviously will associate myself with the comments that others have said here, is really, stand in your truth, but also know that that truth is really, really hard sometimes. And so leverage all of us who are Pepperdine alums. We all work with other alums. We all talk to, young students or even young professionals starting out in their career. We're all really and truly, earnestly happy to help you if you reach out to us. But if you don't call us, then call somebody. Just know you've got to have that community and that network to get you through some of those only days, because those days can be pretty tough. So I'll just leave you with, those comments, and obviously happy to answer questions, but please just know that Dean Karen, Dean Richards, Jesse, thank you for this. I hope we're turning a corner in the country, but we will wait and see.
Thank you, Cicely. Next up is Ray Williams from the Pepperdine Law class of 1992 and a partner at DLA Piper. Ray?
Thanks, Dean Karen. I appreciate it. I am happy that you've invited me, Dean Richards and Jesse, that you all invited me to do this again. I want to say, first of all, that, Judge Barat and Judge Morning are pillars to me, giants in the community, as some might say, or shoulders that you step on. They were in the class of 1991. I was in the class of 1992, and it was really good to see a large number of Black students, law students, when I went to Pepperdine, and they were doing things. So if I hadn't said it to them before, I want to say it now. I want to talk a little bit about, actually I want to talk to our allies, those who are not Black. I want to talk about the killing of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and Breonna Taylor. And I want to talk about that because a diversity of emotions hit me when I saw George Floyd being killed. I was sad, I was angry, I was depressed, and as the months have moved on, I've become hopeful. A flood of memories and emotions came to me and come to me, quite honestly, every time I see the senseless killing of the person who looks like me. And to give you background, I have 4 boys and 6 brothers. So with me, that's 11 Black males who every time they leave their house, well, you understand. I've always known since I was a kid, no sudden movement, hands where they can be seen. Do not give the officer any reason to fabricate your beating or killing. They are not your friends. And you will need to be twice as good as any white person to succeed. And I, like my father and his father before him, passed this information on to my sons. Having this conversation with my boys, it was a must. It's known in our community as the talk or the conversation. Have you had the talk with your boys yet about the police and society? And so when the George Floyd picture was flashed across the screen, me and my boys and my family have had many discussions since his death. And related to systemic racism. And we have discussed how to make this country a better place. One of the things that we did is I marched with 2 of my sons in Philadelphia, just because I felt like I needed to do something. I believe that this country is a wonderful place to live. I believe in the heart of this country, there is a desire to treat all people as equal. For example, the chief of Camden, the city of Camden is one of my friends. And you may have seen him when he was marching with the protesters as the chief of police for the city of Camden. And what I do is I get involved in voter right matters on a pro bono basis. And I do that because I also feel like I'm giving back. I wanted to talk about a time when I was at Pepperdine when I was on campus. It was a Sunday afternoon. This was back in 1990. I was the first year, a 1L, and I was living on campus up in the beautiful mountains. And I walked to the law school, and I'm stopped by 2 police officers. And they were asking me the usual questions. What are you doing here? I go to school. Are you sure you go to school? Yes, here's my ID. And as a black male, young black male at the time, gotten much older since then, obviously. But as a black male, I was just used to it. I didn't think anything of it. I just thought, okay, you know, they're checking to make sure that people who go to this school are actually walking into the building. Until an ally, and Professor McGoldrick, God rest his soul, happened to be walking out the door. And Professor McGoldrick went off on these officers. He went up and down these officers, asking them why they were stopping me. What was it about me that made them feel that they could ask me for my ID? And I was astonished and amazed, and obviously I've never forgotten what an ally looks like. At the time, I didn't understand that's what an ally looks like. But it's clear now that when you see something wrong being done to somebody, and you have the ability to step in and change the course, follow Professor McGoldrick's example. I know I have a limited amount of time, but I want to read a poem to you that I think should help people understand what allyship is. It was written by William Penn. My children go to or went to, some are in college now, went to a Quaker school that was started by William Penn. It's the first Quaker school in the country. And William Penn said, "I expect to pass through this world but once. Any good, therefore, that I can do, or any kindness or abilities that I can show to any fellow creature, let me do it now. Let me not defer it or neglect it, for I shall not pass this way again." And to me, being kind is step one to allyship. People want to feel as though they are not invisible. Say hello, acknowledge them, especially those whose numbers are limited in the places that you go. Try to understand why Black Americans feel the burden of systemic racism. You may not agree with the reasons. You may not even, with all the reasons, you may not even believe there is systemic racism. But to be an ally, you must understand why Black Americans feel this way. Take that understanding and try to find ways to support change in housing, jobs, education, healthcare, and the justice system. And you, especially, as lawyers, as legal professionals, as students have the opportunity to make a change in the justice system. One step at a time, and voices can move mountains. Thank you.
I'd like to take a moment. I'll introduce myself again. My name is Shalak Richards. As of 15 days ago, no longer incoming, I am Assistant Dean at the Law School for Student Life, Diversity, and Belonging. And I want to take a moment before turning to your questions and just say that there's a popular phrase that says, never meet your heroes because they will be sure to disappoint you. And I can say for each person on this call, including Judge Barat, who had to leave, that that is manifestly untrue. These people, as they've said time and time again, have broken barriers, have cast down walls, have taken on landlords, right? And they are heroes. And it is, I am grateful as a graduate of the school for all the steps that you've taken. I'm grateful as a Black attorney for the walls that you've broken down. And I'm so excited for our students, our fellow alumni, for the lawyers who don't know yet that they're to be lawyers, that this group is here to support and to participate and to uplift not only our profession, not only this country, but our world and society. So turning briefly to some of the questions, and I'd like to remind the attendees that the panelists have answered some of your questions in writing, and you can view those if you click on the Q&A box. But we've had several questions around recruitment, recruiting people of color, specifically Black people to the school. I've answered a couple of the questions specifically on scholarships, but because they've worked so hard on this, I'd like to turn to Zena Houston and Judge Mooring to speak a little bit about the recruitment efforts. Ms. Portlock Houston, if you would speak first, and then Judge Mooring.
Thank you. Thank you, Dean. So just, I want to preface the response with that with a few comments. That first, we all have an obligation and duty to recruit, and it's not any one entity, dean suite, professor, individual's duty and obligation. We all have to participate in that. Part of my interest in this area is because when I came to Pepperdine Law School in 1984, there were 5 African-American students in my class. By the time I graduated in 1987, I was the only one of my class to graduate. After graduating, 5 to 7 years, I believe, after graduating, Dean Phillips asked me to be on what was then the Board of Visitors. So I've been on that board, now Board of Advisors, for over 30 years. And in that room, no matter who the dean was of the law school, frequently at the table by myself, although there may have been other African-American board members, they did not show up to the meetings. So I would be in those meetings by myself asking, what are the diversity numbers for incoming 1L students? How many African-American professors do we have at this time? What are the recruitment efforts to bring in more African-American students? That would be my mantra, and many times not wanting to attend those meetings myself. Literally my husband having to give me the boot out of the house. You need to go, you need to go, you need to go, you need to be that voice. And me saying, I'm tired of being the only one to be that voice. And so I just say that to say to all the alums who are on this call, you too can be that voice of recruitment. But in that vein, at one of our last Board of Advisor meetings, when we're talking about diversity, the question of having a chief diversity officer was something that I raised in that board meeting, and that the board and the school adopted. Shortly thereafter, I was on the campus of Tuskegee University, where my son attends, and I happened to run into a professor who was very engaged with the Pre-Law Society. And we started talking about how Tuskegee and other HBCUs could be a funnel of students to our law school. you know, if we're going to talk about diversity, let's make it real. And what better place to start? And Dean Richards was very much in tune with that and making efforts and strides in terms of the recruitment of Black students. And so through a collaboration, I would say, I shared with Dean Karen what my experience had been at Tuskegee and said, how can we use HBCUs as an opportunity to create a funnel for Pepperdine? And to his credit and to the vetting that he did with the administration of Pepperdine Law School, Pepperdine Caruso, I'm very proud of the efforts and his openness and his willingness to hear and see that this could really be something beneficial to all parties. He emailed me back with a proposal that was beyond the things that I was contemplating in terms of how this program could work. And as a result, Dean Richards and I went back to Tuskegee. She went to also Spelman and Morehouse, and we created a memorandum of understanding with those institutions open to all HBCUs who want to come on board, because there's no limit on the number of students that can participate. But phase one is those students who graduate, do their 4 years in undergrad, apply to Pepperdine, and that are admitted will receive 50% of their tuition paid by Pepperdine Caruso School of Law. And they still will be eligible for any other scholarships that are available through the law school. That's phase one. There's 2 other phases to this program. So that's just one element of recruitment that I can personally speak to, that I have hands-on been a part of. And I know Dean Karen and Dean Richards have other aspects of the ongoing recruitment that Pepperdine is doing for students of color in general, but specifically for Black students. But again, I would say to you, each of us, we have to take that responsibility to be recruiters to our institution. Thank you for allowing me to share that.
All right. When I was asked to join the board of advisors, I did come on because specifically I felt that would be an opportunity for me to help diversify the law school. And I came with a number of ideas. First, in San Diego, I'm on the Crawford High School Academy of Law. And that's a program that exists throughout California at various schools, where it becomes an academy, a school within a school at a high school, where the focus is on the law. And Crawford actually happens to be my alma mater. But it's interesting, when I was there, it had a population that was probably about 75% white, and then 25% with Latino and African American. And now my high school has become, I think it's like 95% people of color. It's amazing. It's got communities of people from Africa, from Asia, from Latin America. There's probably about close to 40 different languages spoken by the individuals at the school. So it's a real diverse environment. And the students who are involved in the law program there hopefully will go on to become attorneys. But through the Academy of Law at Crawford High School, there was also another program that I learned about. It's sort of a pipeline. You get the students into the High School Academy of Law, and then there's a program through the state also. It was originally referred to as a 2-2-3 program geared at getting individuals into law school. You do 2 years at a community college, then transfer and do 2 years at a 4-year institution to wrap up with your bachelor's degree, and then 3 years into law school. So that was a program, Pathway to Law, that needed community colleges, local community colleges to sign on board, 4-year institutions, and then law schools. And I saw that program was one that had a lot of the top schools in California. It had Berkeley had signed on, Stanford, UCLA, USC, and I informed the individuals at Pepperdine that I thought we really should try and get accepted into this program because it would be a great way, great pipeline to get students into the law school. And fortunately, they did listen, and Dean Karen and especially Dean Richards filled out all the paperwork and did what was necessary. And not only did they get the law school involved in the 3-year component of that, but the undergraduate campus is also involved. For an individual who goes through the 223 Pathway to Law program, they are given, it's not preferential or promised admission, but they're going to be looked at more carefully and hopefully more positively as someone who can be admitted into the institutions. So that's one program that I'm very happy that I was involved with getting the law school interested in. Another program that I found out and I just love, it's a website that was created by a Latino attorney probably about 15 or 16 years ago. It's called For People of Color, and it's just a website that started out as just a website with lots of helpful advice for individuals who were applying to law school, and then also for those people of color who were then going to take the bar. So it's full of lots of advice. They go around the state and actually around the country putting on programs for undergraduates on how to get into law school. And I've seen them do lots of programs in the LA area and in Northern California, but they'd never come to San Diego, nor had they gone to Pepperdine. So again, I encourage the administration to look into that program. And they now have had at least one session where they've hosted the For People of Color How to Get into Law School programs at Pepperdine. And the hope there is, again, that when individuals have an opportunity to come and see the campus, they'll be interested in Pepperdine, and hopefully we will then increase our numbers. Finally, we always have to just reach out, and even if you're trying to do something systemically, it never hurts just to focus on one or two individuals who you can help. I got a call not too long ago or an email from Jesse and from Shellac asking me to meet with a student, Joseph Castro. I think Joseph is on the line. He was in his first year, he's going into his second year. He came down and he's an amazing young man, first generation American, Filipino, who had immigrated from the Philippines, gone into the Navy, and then once out, went to law school at Pepperdine. He came down and I was so impressed with him that I immediately said, yes, I'll be happy to be a recommendation for you. This summer, he's interning in San Diego, or externing for a federal bankruptcy judge. And he's also got something lined up with Judge Gonzalo Curiel, also on our federal bench here in San Diego. You may have heard of Judge Curiel. He's quite famous. He's a wonderful man, and I think Joseph's going to have a great opportunity working with him. So I've tried to do what I can system-wide and also one-on-one.
Thank you, Judge Mooring. I know our time is drawing short. I do want to first say, sort of with a dean's privilege, I've already said it in the chat box, that I know of everybody on this call that if we connect them, as we did with Judge Mooring and Joe, they will answer the calls, they will answer the emails. So I'd encourage any of the attendees who would like to be connected more just for discussion, for mentorship, et cetera, please. Of course, the bios were circulated, and these are very, very prominent and powerful people. So their contact information is available online, if only through their various law firms and businesses. But I'm happy to facilitate those connections as well. Given that our questions and answers are abounding, I'm also going to soft commit, maybe in smaller groups, that we will reconvene some of these and others from our community to address some of these. For example, working with allies or the criminal justice system, or even conversations to be had around micro and macro causes of racial injustice and bias. These are so involved. We have a few minutes left, so I don't want to push too much on that. There is one that was raised that I think, this group could speak to, and that was, we've seen students give letters and petitions. We've seen our faculty put out a letter around and a statement around racial injustice. And there's a question here as to whether or not alumni could or should put out such a statement officially saying, we as alumni of Pepperdine Law stand against injustice, systemic injustice, and so on. And I'm going to put that out here for a final word if any of you would be interested in such a letter. Of course, I'm not committing you to spearhead any projects, but if you would be interested in such a thing.
Yes. Yes. And by the way, yes, I think it's necessary.
Listen, I would certainly say that putting the letter out is necessary. I do think that actions sometimes, so what's behind the letter, and what we're doing behind that letter is more important than the letter itself. I think the letter going out, great, I'll sign it. Here I am, signed. But I think the things that we're doing behind that letter are so much more important.
Thank you. Well, seeing that our time is up, I'll see if Dean Karen has any final words. I will be pulling these questions, and so to the extent we can email them out or again organize future panels around these issues. We have questions around employment law and discrimination. We have questions around criminal justice and micro and macro aggressions that I think would be very powerful to have. So please keep an eye out for your emails, alumni from Jessie Faye, alerting you to future events and to our social media and websites, particularly our diversity webpage, where we'll certainly be posting all of these and including other resources. Dean Karen?
Yeah, all I would say is just thank everyone for being here. And I often say that I love Pepperdine Caruso Law, but I love even more the Pepperdine Caruso Law that we aspire to be. And so I invite everyone here, all our board members and Dean's Council members and all other folks here to just join with us and help make the law school we love even better in the future. Thank you all.
Jessie, before you end, can you stop recording and see if there's a way to download the Q&A box or